Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. I'm staying at this really weird hotel, which it has this really annoying rain sound when we open the window, but then it's too hot and it's a problem, but we're leaving here in 10 minutes, so that's great. Okay, so I want to answer some questions I've been getting, so thank you for the people who are sending me messages. However you want to send them, email, DM in the comments below. Totally works for me. But this particular guy was wanting a shout out, Yoni Vuori, and he's given me a lot of different questions, a lot of which are political, and as many times as I need to remind people of this, I'm not very interested in politics. I claim political neutrality. I do not like answering political questions. I'm probably about as disinterested in answering political questions as I am in touching anything medical, because that stuff kind of grosses and freaks me out, to be honest. If you want to ask me psychology or philosophy questions, that's fine. I can answer that. But anyway, one of these questions was related much more to dating in America. There was kind of an impression that Americans are having kids relatively young, whereas in Finland, it's common to just date with somebody the rest of your life and not necessarily commit to them in marriage. Getting married and having kids isn't as popular these days as it was before. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into this. One of the things that I found incredibly shocking when I came to Finland was the rate at which people will have this sort of common law marriage thing and this whole situation where you can legally register your marriage, which is going to entitle you to all the same tax benefits as a married couple would have. Now, that variation does not exist in the US, so we need to start with that. Taxes are also a really big deal in the US. So I'm not saying that people necessarily get married to evade taxes is not the right word, but let's say benefit from the tax system. I prefer that style of language. Yeah, it's a thing. And I've mentioned this also before, and I do have another video on dating, I'm pretty sure, in Finland versus the US, so I have to figure out how to rename this one because it's touching a little bit of different topics. And I'm not really going to get into personal experience here because the disclaimer is I have not dated a Finnish person. So I can go off of what other people tell me and what I've seen and me watching Finnish friends date and talk to me about dating. But I couldn't tell you what the difference is personally. I can tell you the differences I've observed, which is that I do think people are a lot more casually regarding relationships than what I would see in the US. The thing I always try to get people to understand is you have to keep in mind that people came from Europe to the Americas in the 1700s because they were seeking religious freedom. There's a lot of persecution going on in Europe with people trying to translate the Bible and then people going after and trying to kill that. This is a whole history thing. I'm not going to get super into that, but there's research to back that up. Now, if part of what you're trying to save is your identity around religiosity, it makes sense that those principles or ideas around marriage being valued and being important in a union between a man and a woman would continue to be more commonplace in the US than they are in Europe. So again, part of it's a tax thing. Part of it, I think, is a moral religious argument. Now, some of the reasons why people in the US who maybe aren't super wanting to get married, and these people do exist, there are certain things if you're on your deathbed and you want to be seen in the hospital, you don't necessarily have that right if you're not married to the person. And I, for some reason, recently found out that this is actually the same situation in Finland. So I guess people don't think about that one. But as for the taxes, since it's regarded practically as the same, that's why it's very common. In fact, my one Finnish friend was explaining to me that his parents only got married when he was approximately 19 years old, due to the fact that if one of them died, the other one would get the pension. So maybe there is some sort of financial benefit around being married in Finland, but to me it just seems less obvious or explicit than what would be seen in the US. So I think that's it for the marriage and taxes discussion. And, marriage is still a value in the US. I think in Finland it's a lot more commonly accepted to have children out of wedlock. That's definitely something that's still quite a bit stigmatized in the US today. So I think kind of people have this very linear, actually, because recently I was talking to one of my Finnish friends about this, and she's 4 years younger than me, and she's all my friends did different things. Some got married, some had kids, some studied, some went straight into work, some moved here, some moved there. They all did a bunch of different things. I'd say in the US, the course of action for people's lives tends to be a lot more linear, right? I've mentioned this before in another video, but on the back of a Snapple cap, if you don't know what Snapple is, you can Google it. It's basically iced tea. It says that something like 75% of Americans live within a 20-mile radius of where they were born. So, like, Americans are just not very exploratory, very ironically, for a country that was founded by explorers. But yeah, so like the linear path is like you graduate, you either go straight into employment or you're going to go on to some sort of secondary education and then get employment. And then you may get married and get a house, whichever order that comes in. It's kind of unclear, but kind of one goes and then the other goes, and then have kids. Or you have kids and then you get a house. This is something in that order. Like, this is just very, like, what people do kind of thing. And, like, you know, moving around a lot or different job opportunities and being there and being here, like, kind of what I've done. I would not say, like, I know any other American who's done this. And my impression has been that the Americans who do kind of behave that way don't usually have a lot of forethought into, like, how they're doing it. I'm not sure I should necessarily claim that I myself have, but I guess it's like my observation of the people who are like super into traveling. It's usually like they don't have a concept of like future planning, so sometimes I can't necessarily relate to them on that note. Whereas I would say that Europeans seem to be open a lot more to moving around for different opportunities, whereas Americans, I think there are enough opportunities probably where you live that's just not necessary. Like, you could pretty much do the same thing you're doing in a bunch of different places in the US and it wouldn't really matter too much location wise. Like, I'd say like me moving to Texas to work at NASA, like, that's exceptional, right? Like, and yeah, most people who work at NASA did do that. Okay. Because you're attracting talent. I say talent talking about myself. No, but from all over the world. So all over the world. No, sorry, US, you have to be US citizen. All over the country to come there. Okay. So there's like, you know, that whole thing about the trajectory being more linear. Now, the other thing is that I think that there is more of an intentionality with Americans dating than with Finnish people dating. I do think that the end goal for most American relationships is still marriage. I think in my observation among Americans has been the only people who are not very into or open to that are people who have been burned. Like, what I mean is like people like my mom who have been divorced twice and like don't particularly want to get married a third time. And like, I get it. Like, I totally get it. Or like the girl my brother's dating, like, same situation. Like, the mom was divorced and then she just kind of eternally dates the not stepdad. Like, these situations like do exist, and I think they have good reason to exist. I think it makes sense why people choose them. But I would say starting out, like, young people, right? Like, if we're going to focus on that demographic, there is still this sort of ideology or hope that marriage is going to happen. Now, the other thing that I think happens is that Finland is far less patriarchal than, like, legitimately any other country I've ever seen. A lot of that has to do with the what do they call it? The paternity leave policies that are in place, like that, you know, demand that you spend 3 months at home with the kid. And apparently there's a new policy where there's an additional, my friend just told me this, an additional 3 months, and either parent can take it, the mom or the dad, so that you get like combined a total of 9 months. It's honestly pretty cool, but yeah, it's something that is definitely unique to Finland. And I know that that's part of why the equality exists. You know, some of it might be kind of built into the culture, like Finnish people tending to be a little bit like more low key and humble. I think in the US there's still like a little bit of that. I have no better word for explaining this besides like macho influence of like men have to be like a little bit more domineering. In Finland, it just feels like, to me, women feel more equitable in the dating game. Now, I know there's a whole big issue with, like, maybe in this weird way, women have more leverage now than they used to. Like, you can easily consider the example of dating apps and how, like, it's easier for women to use them than men, supposedly. I don't know. I couldn't speak to that, but, like, supposedly that's a thing. Yeah, it's just my observation is that, you know, in Finland, the dating scene is a lot more casual. I also have an understanding that international people have a very hard time dating Finnish people. We had a bet, actually, one time with this American. Me and my one American friend, we bet against this other American that he couldn't get a Finnish girlfriend in 4 months. And he didn't. He ended up with a Russian girlfriend. But that was hilarious. But no, it's, like, seriously very hard. You know, why is that? Could be, like, a xenophobia, racism aspect. And I don't think that's, like, too taboo to say, because I think most Finnish people will acknowledge that Finland has a racism issue. There's actually a ranking that Finland is, like, like in the top 3 of the most racist countries in the US, in the EU. Like, I should find that. I'll find that somewhere. I learned that in the class. So yeah, that probably has something to do with it. But then the other thing that I've heard foreign men who I'm friends with complain about is that women are into something very casual and then they're not necessarily wanting a relationship. And I could see that going on both sides. So I guess Finnish people get in a relationship somehow with each other. I don't know. You know, this is where I need my audience to fill me in, because like I literally have no idea. Yeah, but just my understanding from talking to people has been that it just is a lot more casual, and like, you know, people may be in these like weird situationship things for a long time, but nobody really wants to commit to each other. Now, don't get me wrong, that can exist anywhere and everywhere in the US. It just seems like in Finland, there's much more of a priority. Maybe it's the whole sisu mentality of like depending on yourself and not wanting to ask other people for help. And maybe it feels like with being in a relationship, there's a sort of dependency on other people that inside the very soul of a Finnish person makes them very uncomfortable. And I could see that being like the driving factor. Whereas I would make the argument that Americans are the complete opposite, and Americans trend towards codependence in relationships. Why do I say that? Because for some weird reason, Americans think that once they get their significant other and they get their full-time job, that they can just write off all their friends. Now, I'm not going to accuse every single person of doing that, but it has happened. I've seen it happen most of the time. And I don't really know what created the culture of that. I think it has to do with the fact that people work a lot. People are very busy. Like, the struggle is real in the US. I mean, don't get me wrong, the struggle is real in a lot of places. I always say the only place that could have been worse for me to be born would be like Japan or China. But, you know, they have declining birth rate issues, and we don't need to ask ourselves why. I just explained it. Like, especially Japan, and you're like, it's a developed country, what the heck is going on? Like, people are working too much, and it's hard. Like, it's really hard to have energy to go date people when you're working a lot. And sometimes friends are easier because they're lower maintenance. You don't have to talk to them every day. Yeah, so I don't know. Actually, I don't even know that Finnish people in their relationships feel like they have to talk to each other every day. So yes, it is like lower maintenance in that sense too. So I don't know, but I guess I'm going to leave it there, because some of this I'm speculating on, some of it is just drawing on experience. And yeah, you can let me know what you agree and disagree with in the comments. I'll try to keep answering questions, so please keep them coming if you have more questions. And I guess that's going to be everything. So thank you, and until my next video. Bye.